What is the meaning of life? This is perhaps one of the deepest and most fundamental problems that a human being can ask. In this video, I will summarize the answer of philosopher John Cottingham to this question, one of the rare philosophers who explore this question deeply and systematically, especially as laid out in his book on the meaning of life. So what does it mean for a life to be meaningful? One of the features Cottingham put forward is that it is a life with a certain profundity or seriousness. A meaningful life thus involves activities that are not trivial or silly. If an individual chooses to spend his life counting the total number of stones in his backyard, such a life would lack the seriousness that Cottingham talks about. This is the reason why many people see the lot of Sisyphus as meaningless. Sisyphus was a king condemned by the gods to roll a massive rock up a hill, but just as he was about to reach the top, the rock would fall all the way down, and Sisyphus would have to repeat his task again and again and again. The triviality of Sisyphus' punishment is what makes such a life meaningless. The second feature of a meaningful life is that it is, in the words of Cottingham, achievement-oriented, that is, directed towards some goal or requiring some focus of energy or concentration or rhythm in its execution. A meaningful life is one that is not lived in utter passivity, where one totally depends on others for things to work out. Instead, it is one where we are consumed by worthwhile goals that give us focus and direction. The third feature is that meaningfulness in action implies a certain degree of self-awareness or transparency to the agent. For me to engage in a meaningful activity, I must have some grasp of what I am doing, and my interpretation of it must reflect purposes of my own that are more or less transparent to me. In this context, this is an example for someone who fails to possess this feature. A bully who derives satisfaction from hurting others, satisfaction that stems from a damaged sense of self-worth, produced by his upbringing at the hands of a tyrannical and sadistic father. Cottingham's point here is clear. It is necessary that an agent is fully engaged in a self-aware way, undistorted by external manipulation or unconscious projection, on systematic projects that reflect her own rational choice as an autonomous agent, for that agent to have a meaningful life. But is this all there is to it? Cottingham thinks not. And one missing piece is the need for a moral orientation. Human lives, as Cottingham noted, are subject to an array of interlinked imperatives: biological, social, emotional, and rational imperatives. And Cottingham continues, in the light of this complex context of interaction and interpersonal dialogue within which we must live our lives, there has to be something unstable about a compartmentalized vision in which individual pursuits and activities can be thought of as bestowing meaning in isolation, irrespective of their moral status, of how they impinge on others. So what about those artistic geniuses who produce great creative works but do not care so much about the demands of morality? Take for instance the case of Paul Gauguin, who selfishly dumped his family to pursue a self-indulgent but highly creative life in Tahiti. Has Gauguin failed to have a meaningful life? For Cottingham, yes, he did fail, since a truly meaningful life is one that allows us to flourish into lives that fully embrace our human potentialities for fellow feeling and rational dialogue with others. A meaningful life is one that makes us more human in the pursuit of fulfillment and meaning in ways that involve deceiving or hurting others or making use of them as mere instrumental fodder for one's own success, closing one's heart and mind to the voice of one's fellow creatures. These are modes of activity that make one less human. Cottingham is clear that a meaningful life is an integrated life, where one's personal projects are not kept in isolation from the demands on one as a human being who stands in a relationship with others. So, having laid out the above features that make life necessarily meaningful, is there a need to add more? The features may be necessary, but Cottingham thinks that they are still not sufficient. Why not? This is because for a project or activity to give meaning to our lives, they need to have at least some minimal aspect of success. And if a project is found to be futile or doomed to failure, our view of its meaningfulness also changes. Cottingham notes two kinds of existential futility that haunts our quest for meaning, a universal and a particular kind of futility. The universal kind arises from the thought that nothing much in the natural world endures for very long, and that any successes will at best only be temporary. This sentiment is echoed by philosopher William Lane Craig in a famous article on the meaning of life, where he put out this vivid description. The entire universe marches irreversibly toward its grave. So not only is the life of each individual person doomed, the entire human race is doomed. The universe is plunging toward inevitable extinction. That is written throughout its structure. There is no escape. There is no hope. The futility of a particular kind stems from the observation with regards to the pursuit of goodness, and how it is loaded with struggle, that the chance of success is, as Cottingham describes it, often decidedly slim, perhaps at best not much more than evens. This fact shows that the search for a meaningful life, especially as it connects with the need for a moral orientation, is subject to luck. Cottingham wants to emphasize here the need for existential buoyancy of the good over the vicious, since if there is nothing to support the hope that the good will ultimately triumph, if essentially we are on our own, then it is hard to see how we can achieve the necessary confidence and resolution to follow the path of goodness. Here is where the need for a religious orientation comes in as a fundamental feature of a meaningful life. Such orientation provides the hope that the pursuit of virtue is not a mere accidental byproduct of nature, but that it contributes to the establishment of a moral order that the cosmos was created to realize. Thus, the religious impulse bridges the gap between human weakness and human aspiration by providing us a kind of radical interior modification which affirms the power of goodness. However, what Cottingham means by religious orientation has less to do with doctrines and beliefs and more to do with practices of spirituality, such as techniques of meditation and prayer, techniques for self-examination and greater self-awareness, and so on. And so, what does it mean to live within a religious framework? Cottingham suggests 4 elements. First is to view life as a gift, not an accident, bestowed by a source that is generative of the true, the good, and the beautiful. Second is to see one's life as hinging on responsibility, freedom, and the choice between good and evil. Third is to adopt a pattern of life structured by traditions of worship, ones that bring out moral and spiritual awareness. Fourth and last is to be mindful of the truth that life is made meaningful by love, the self-giving kind, that only in the truly outgoing impulse can a created being transcend itself and begin to reflect the self-giving radiance of its creator. And this is my summary of John Cottingham's view on the meaning of life, especially as expressed in his book On the Meaning of Life. It is a deeply insightful book, philosophically and emotionally engaging, and beautifully poetic in its form. I hope you learned something from this summary And if you want to get deeper, I suggest you pick up the book and devour it. Until next time, and thank you for watching.